Welcome to the Spotlight segment. This is a segment dedicated to interviews with developers or interesting happenings in the world of Android. And now for this week's episode, here's your Spotlight. We now move on to the main topic, and that's the Indigo Nav. And we want to welcome our guest, Mike May from the Indigo navigation team. Mike, let's talk about you. You know, there was a song there by Toby Keith, we talk about you. Now let's talk about me. But in this case, instead of talking about us, we want to talk about you. Let's first, though, talk about you. Give us a little background. So some people who really do not know you, I know that I've known you for a long time, most especially way back. We're talking about the early 2000s, and you guys have the Sendero group. You are part of that, or you are the one that actually founded that. Take us down that lane, Mike, and then walk us through, and then we'll get to where we are today, where we will be talking about the Indigo Nav.
Hi, this is Mike May, now with the American Printing House for the Blind, most of my consulting time, and I'm thrilled to be on with you here again, Warren. It's been a bit, but you bring back some memories when you mentioned Sendero Group. I went to work for Arkenstone in 1994, 95, and we started with the Strider project. And Strider was on a laptop, a GPS system on a laptop. And over the years, the products have just gotten smaller, more convenient, more powerful, but the basic concept has really remained the same for 30 years, which is, as blind people, we need location information. We need to know what's around. Sighted people get that from print signs, and they don't really think about it. It's just in their environment. So their need for GPS is more about turn by turn. Ours is that plus the location information. So I've been working on that, beginning with the Sendero Group and those different systems, launching in 2012 our first iPhone version app, which is closely related to the one that we're talking about today, Indigo. Indigo stands for Independent Go, Indigo. I should make sure when you look it up in the App Store and Play Store that you search for Indigo Nav, N-A-V, because there's lots of other Indigo names on there.
Very interesting. I didn't know why the name Indigo, but I could see, I can see a little bit. So I could see the fact that actually the icon looks like the indigo color. So I thought maybe you guys just wanted something different and just gave it the name Indigo. And I was going to be asking you, so thanks for explaining as to what that Indigo stands for.
Well, the
I
other
thought it
thing,
was
Warren,
the color.
yeah, it's also a bird, and as you might know from APH products, there's an insect theme with the monarch and the mantis, and there's a bird theme with the cardinal, which is the rebranded Trekker. So yeah, we're in the bird theme as well.
That really makes sense. So the indigo, yeah. Now you're going to make me try to, do some Gemini interactivity later on today about the indigo bird, because I want to learn more about the bird, where it's found, especially here in North America and all of that. So thanks for educating me. I didn't know there was a bird called an indigo. So as they say, we learn something every day. So this is one of those things that I'm learning. All right, so you got that, and then Mike, you got another thing, because we had you back here in 2020. Our podcast was the very first one that you came on to talk about good maps, and I'll never forget that. We call it the Christmas gift. Back then, it was in the month of December, almost to Christmas, and you were on, and we talked about good maps from you and the crew from the American Printing House. And so would that be like the foundation? I know a lot of people have been talking about the Nearby Explorer, and a lot of people have been crying about the fact that the Nearby Explorer has gone. Let's talk about this Indigo, the pretty bird Indigo,
Hmm.
takes me up on a flight. How is that different from Good Maps, for example? Because it seems like it's kind of like a rebranding. Some people have found out that it was a rebranding of the Good Maps, for example. So let's talk about that, because if someone already has Good Maps installed, then they will get the update and the rebranding.
Yeah, that's right. And so the evolution of that product was in 2012 we launched as Seeing Eye GPS because they were a sponsor of the app, and in Europe it was RNIB Navigator. They was a sponsor, and then Australia and New Zealand was um, I think it was called AU NSW GPS, lots of letters, and that's because they were sponsors. The at that time it was just iPhone. Then in 2018, when we shut Sendero down after 19 years, the GPS app went to IRA. And IRA had it for about 2 years with the idea that let's use GPS to get near your destination. And as we all know, with all GPS apps, it's the final frustrating 15 feet or 50 feet that is an issue. You get near the building, but where the heck is the door? So there's a lot of
Exactly.
different ways to approach that, and IRA was one. So they thought, well, this is a good marriage, GPS and IRA. And after a couple of years, they hadn't released it, but they did create an Android version. So hats off to them for doing that. And Greg Stilson was there at the time, and he's now at APH. And so I joined Good Maps. I was out of the GPS business for about 2 years. And then when Good Maps Indoors was founded in 2019, I joined that team to work on the indoor navigation. And then Ira said, well, we're not releasing it. Why don't you guys, this is your core business, navigation. So why don't you take it back? So we did Good Maps. We rebranded it Good Maps Outdoors to distinguish it from the indoor version. And I worked on it a little bit there. We made a few improvements, but mostly the big improvement was we went from a subscription version to a free version. So that was a big deal. And then after a couple of years, 3 years, then I left Good Maps and went over to the APH team, which is the primary owner of Good Maps. And I have a broader responsibility there, working on all things orientation and mobility, not just GPS. And of course, I thought, well, let's see if we can update Good Maps Outdoors, because Greg and I and Joe Hodge and many others realized that there's a huge importance to outdoor navigation. Indoor navigation, it's great and it's up and coming. It's very important, but 95% of our time we're in places that don't have indoor capabilities, but we do have outdoors worldwide. So Good Maps Outdoors came over to APH and was rebranded Indigo Nav. And most importantly, APH has invested in making improvements. And so we've been doing that for quite a few months now, and we'll continue to make improvements going forward. And then this also ties back in history to Nearby Explorer and the different versions of that. And as you say, there's a very passionate following of Nearby who are very annoyed that it went away. And in some fashions, they still have it, but there are features unique to Nearby that aren't in other apps. So I'm listening hard and hoping that we can bring some of those things into Indigo. The laundry list of things to work on is very long. You'd think after 30 years of GPS, we would have gotten through the list, but it
Yeah,
seems to keep growing.
keeps growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know one of the things that people really like with Nearby Explorer is that geo beaming,
Mm-hmm.
finding the door. Because as you indicated earlier when you started talking, yeah, the last 50 feet, for example, I took the Indigo Nav for a drive, basically a test drive yesterday. My daughter and I went walking around the neighborhood, and then I was telling it to take me back home. And of course, we came and it was telling me I was 49 feet away from my destination on the right, which was great. But then, of course, like we've always said, if I was going to a place that I've never been, finding that door is the challenge, becomes a problem for a blind person. And that's why some people were crying about nearby Explorer, and I can see where they're coming from. I was getting into an airport somewhere, and I was having difficulty finding the door, but good thing I kept walking. And of course, as you pass by the door, it will automatically open. So I can see why people are crying about this, but I'm hoping though that Mike, somehow you guys would figure out how to implement that, because that is a feature that a lot of us or a lot of the users would like to see come to this Indigo navigation.
Yeah, that's one that people have talked about. Transit is another, and we have a basic transit feature in Indigo, and I think that will be expanded upon. We have a virtual mode, which is pretty cool. It does not have the ability of arrow keys like we had in the original Sendero Windows product, and also something called APH PC Maps. But there was a version in nearby. So we're going to look at that and how you can do more exploring virtually. Soundscape had their version of exploring streets. So this idea of know before you go is super important to understanding when you're actually dealing with mobility. You may not be able to focus totally on navigation. So it's nice to have in your head an idea of where things are ahead of time. So we'll do more with virtual mode. There's a very underutilized aspect of Indigo that was in Good Maps and Seeing Eye. It's a breadcrumb mode. It's labeled as waypoint route, and that allows you to create breadcrumbs any place you want and retrace those steps. And it's pretty good, and people really, really wanted it, and so we put it in, and then I didn't really find that many people used it in the end. One thing I would say is that no matter what product you use, the important thing is that you use it regularly, because all of these things get easier, and it kind of in your head goes into the background once you're really familiar with the app and what to expect. So whether it's Nearby or Indigo or Voice Vista or Blind Square or others, there's many. I mean, I think I probably have 30 apps on my phone that have something to do with GPS. So it's just really important that they all have their pros and cons, and you learn to be an effective user, because having location information makes you much more literate. We talked about Braille literacy. I think equally important is location literacy.
Welcome to Apps Junkieville. Mike, I love having several different apps on my device as well. I have many navigational apps as well. So the thing that interests me, Mike, is that breadcrumb you're talking about, because I think that's the most important part of the experience. Talk to us, explain to us how this works. So, for example, I've always wanted something like that. For example, so I'm at my door. I want to drop the first crumb here, and so that when I'm coming back, then it would find that. So can you explain to our people, probably those who don't quite have the understanding of how this works and how the process works?
Yeah, there's two ways of dealing with that. Probably my most common use case was I'm in a hotel and I want to just go wandering around. I don't necessarily have a route in mind. So I would drop a user point of interest at the hotel entrance. And sometimes those entrances are in a parking lot or through a big driveway. So getting back to the exact spot can be a little tricky. In that case, I would just record a user point of interest, 1 point. And then I set that as my destination or as my virtual position, so I can reference it once I walk around. the city for a while, and then I say I want to know where that is, and so I'm going to set it as my destination and use it as the crow flies, or I can create a route to it. Breadcrumb mode is really meant more for a route that just doesn't make sense on streets. Maybe you're cutting through a park, you're on a university campus, and some of the roads or sidewalks are not on the map. That's where breadcrumb mode becomes important. So when you implement it, you turn it on, it starts recording a breadcrumb.
Wonderful. That makes sense because
Yeah,
I know people want that. I know I do
So,
want a feature like that.
so you as the user, just for clarification, as the user, you don't have to think about it. It records your current route. You don't have to actually drop breadcrumbs as you go, or do you?
you can if you want. So if you get to a particular intersecting sidewalk on a park, and you want, then you can record. You can change the name of it. You can shake the phone to record a point. Otherwise, it's just recording points. I think once a second, and then every so many seconds, I've forgotten now what it is, 90 seconds or something, it puts in waypoint 1, waypoint 2, and creates a route that then you can then load. You can save it and then load it when you want to return and rewalk that path or use it on another day.
Oh, okay, cool. So it pretty much takes care of itself once you enable it until, like, if you want to specify, like, if you want to rename a specific waypoint while you're at that area, then you can do that if you choose to. But if you
That's
don't,
right.
it'll still record your path. Okay, cool.
Correct.
I think it's a brilliant implementation because, like you indicated, Mike, if I'm at a hotel, I remember I always tell this story. I went to a convention. This was in 1995 in Fresno, California. It was a big, big holiday inn. And to be honest, I didn't get a hang of that hotel until the very day we were about leaving before I finally figured out that hotel. There were so many elevators. I'd never seen a holiday inn that big. So something of this nature would have come in very handy.
Yeah, the first version of that, where I really gained an appreciation for this, was before routes and any of this stuff was really working. In the mid 90s, there was an NFB convention at Disneyland in Anaheim. And if you walked to the Disneyland front gate on the streets, on the sidewalks, it was about a mile and a half or 2 miles, because you really had to circumvent this 200-acre parking lot. But if you went straight from the hotel across the parking lot to the front gate, it was less than half a mile. So we had a fun contest, and this is when everything was in a backpack, and you had lots of cords, and the biggest risk was that something was going to come unplugged. And so we had people challenged to see if you could find a way from the parking lot, line of sight, as a crow flies, to the main gate of Disneyland. And then we had somebody else who was taking the street path, and we wanted to see who could get there first. And we did have some equipment failure, but it was far faster to go straight through the parking lot.
I like that you brought up an amusement park because this is like the perfect example of where you won't have mapping information available to you, and this waypoint feature would come in useful, or breadcrumb feature, because you could just say, if you're with like a big group of people and you're going to go off on your own, you're like, we're going to meet back at this specific ride, at a certain time. You can just, mark that point and find your way back on your own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I did a lot of that. I'm a Braille Note PK user, and the GPS still works on that. And we've got, between collective users, we've got about 15,000 points of interest marked around the world. And that was a really easy way to mark those rides. And even though you didn't get a route to them, you could always know, relative to your position, that Space Mountain is 127 feet to your right. and then you can work your way to it.
Mike, let's talk about something that has come to our attention on our email group, and that has to do with availability. I know that the Nearby Explorer wasn't available worldwide until Nearby Online came through. Now, how about this one? Some people are reporting that they're not seeing Indigo in their locations, especially folks outside the US. Is this something that is available for folks outside of the United States, or is just for the meantime, just from within the States?
No, it's in most countries, perhaps not all countries. I mean, there's places like Luxembourg that I remember, were not on the list, but it's in most countries. The translation is pretty basic, so it may not be the greatest translation in some other countries. We've heard a few reports of in Germany where some of the prompts came out in a combination of German English. These are things that our development team will be working on and tweaking. But if somebody is in a country and they don't see Indigo Nav in the App Store, certainly email us and we'll get it added.
Thank you so much. Yeah, because some of the people were reporting that they haven't seen it in their locations. And Germany is one of those areas. I know we have a friend there, our friend Eva, who's reporting that she's not seeing it. So maybe it's coming up in what I call Germerang, German and English merge together. Maybe the name Indigo Nav is something else or whatever. Maybe it comes up with a different name in Germany. Who knows? But it could be the reason why people are not seeing. But if you guys are hearing us, if you're listening to this episode and you're not finding it, you just reach out to these guys and they'll get you the appropriate URL so you could get hold of it.
Yeah, probably the best approach is email support@aph.org and just let them know, hey, I'm not finding it in my country. And then we can go into the dashboard and double check that the country is on the list. It should definitely be in Germany, but there might be some other smaller countries that are not on the list. And there's no reason for that. It really should be available everywhere. There are no guarantees in terms of what map data is there. It's using Google Maps for the streets, and it's using Foursquare for the points of interest. We're hoping to expand to some other point of interest databases, but that's what we have right now.
And we'll have the exact link to the app in the Play Store in the show notes. So make sure you try that link. And if that's not working for you, then go ahead and contact them.
Perfect.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about something else that I observed when I took it out for a walk yesterday. Actually, a couple or maybe three things that I want to talk about. First, let's talk about the visual stuff. You've got the ability to have the background as one would like it to be. But then I noticed that though when you tap on the visual map, even though I've set my background to the dark, it comes up bright. So I'm not sure if it's something you guys are aware of and if you guys are going to fix it, because I know we have some people that always want everything to be in dark mode. And so I was surprised that when I tap on the visual stuff, it came up in a bright mode, even though I've chosen to use the dark background.
Yeah, you're talking about the actual Google map visually, right?
Yeah.
That is not something I've heard anybody mention. We're assuming that 99% of people don't bother with the visual map. Indigo is focusing obviously on blind user and accessibility, so the visual component of it is pretty weak. We have some basic low vision contrast things, as you mentioned. I did see one report, somebody saying when you go to edit, the color contrast is not maintained, and so I've reported that. So that's something that we should be able to fix. I don't know about changing the actual map. I can mention it, and if it's an easy fix, we can fix it. But for, let's say 1% of the users, it's probably not something we would make as a major priority.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think that if for example, because I have my regular Google Maps set to the dark mode. So if it's going to be activating my maps at that point, it should just follow that map uh, theme that I've chosen as my system. So I was kind of finding it odd that it didn't follow that, most especially if it's utilizing the Google Maps.
So
Yeah,
even though you have yours set to dark mode in Google, when you use it in Indigo, it
Yeah, it
goes
came
bright.
out light. Yeah.
hopefully it's just something simple,
Yeah.
API related, that you could enable to have it follow the theme of your app or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's encouraging. If it's that straightforward, then I'll submit that bug and see what happens.
Another thing that I observed, and I talked to Joe Hodge about it, is the voices. For example, of course, it uses the Google Voice, Google TTS, and it's not necessarily using the TTS that TalkBack has. But what I noticed, however, is that if TalkBack tries to talk, or if you put your finger down and the GPS is talking, let's say I'm in the look around, for example, that will cut off the speech. And I was wondering if you guys could make it possible to where one could choose any different TTS of their own choice, like you guys had in the Nearby Explorer, for example. If I wanted to choose, let's say, Vocalizer, or if someone has Eloquent still working on their device, they could choose that, or the Sear Play, one of those a cappella voices for their navigational purposes, so that it doesn't get interrupted by the talkback. Because I noticed, even though it's using that voice from the Google TTS and not the one that is tied to talkback, especially the new talkback, for some reason, if I unload talkback and I enable the look around, it doesn't work, because it seems to be it needs accessibility to be on. And so I thought that's a very interesting bug.
Yeah, Joe wrote that up, and I have to say I had a hard time wrapping my head around how that works, since I'm not an Android user. But he has written up a bug report for that, and so they'll be looking into it. On the iPhone, the background voice, as I call it, is handled in a different section from the voiceover voice. And that background voice, you can pick the voice and change the speed and the rate and so forth. It's not in Indigo, but it's in the iPhone. However, in iOS 26, the latest version that came out, that you no longer can control things that gets communicated to the app. So Apple broke something, and right now they're saying it's an app specific thing, but I know in multiple apps it doesn't work. So that needs to be sorted out. And I think we try as much as possible to have parallel functionality in Android and iOS, and we need to get that parallel voices going in Android better.
The third thing that I really liked, and yet I had some problems with when I took it on a walk, I like the fact that it tells me when I'm coming up across a four-way intersection, for example. And I really like that, because for me, I want to know that. I want to know what street, whether it's Tacoma Street that I'm coming up, and, whether Tacoma is going through or not, and stuff like that. But for some reason, I noticed yesterday when I was walking with it back home, that sometimes it's saying stuff like the whatever's 300 feet, while I'm almost already there on the corner, or I'm already actually crossing that. And I'm wondering what that could be. Probably, like you say, as I use it more and more, it may get more adaptable, adapt to what I'm using it for, and all of that. And of course, I'm using it on my Pixel 10 Pro to be specific. And I had a couple crashes yesterday, and also that could be related to the fact that I'm actually not using the stable version of Android 16. I'm using the Android QPR 2. So that could be it. But apart from that, the delay of repeating my location, or telling my location or how many feet I am when I'm already actually like
Hmm.
on the corner or already crossing the street, can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well, and it's a number of factors. One is, of course, GPS accuracy at the time and map accuracy. You always assume that the maps are 100% accurate, and they aren't. In Davis, where I do a lot of testing, the map grid is off by as much as 100 feet. And so it tells you to turn
Wow.
left on 7th Street, and 7th Street doesn't happen for another 100 feet. So
Yeah.
it could be, a street is off by 20 feet, could be off by 100 feet. But this, I, I think this is one of the highest priority items to get right, because the whole point of the app for blind people is we want more specific information, and turning information is critical. Intersection, cross street information is critical. So let's find other ways to make it more accurate. One of the things that Google has tried to do is to have their, I forget their name for it, but the camera detects certain information in your environment, Street View, maybe. And that helps to determine what specific corner you're on. I don't find that it works that well, but I think the concept is really good, and this is where perhaps AI can really augment what's been done in the past by being able to use the camera to see there's a crosswalk there. I'm at the street, so even if the map is off by 100 feet, we know because the camera is real time that there's a crosswalk, and then let's process that information accordingly. So I think AI is going to become a big part of navigation going forward. I know other companies are working on this. I met with a new company, Pulse Touch or something, in Eindhoven, Netherlands, and there's some young guys, and they're really starting out from the idea of let's navigate with AI. And sometimes newbies are, come up with some innovations that us old timers haven't really tuned into. So I'm trying to pay attention to these things and look at how we can make the street intersection data even more accurate.
Thank you so much, Mike. We've taken a lot of your time, but I'm going to ask a last one, which is not very important. So we're talking about uh, offline availability. Is this something you guys may bring along sometime? Say one could pre-download a map for offline navigation in the event that I'm navigating and I lose connectivity. Would this be something that could be looked into?
Well, connectivity is the pain point for all of these different apps. And so anytime we can move something over to the phone, the on-device maps would be fantastic. It's definitely on the list. It's a very heavy lift because the whole scheme is all now based on getting real-time data from the cloud. But maybe there's a way we can have a small segment, a 1 square mile segment gets downloaded on your phone, and address it that way. So it's on the list.
Thank you. That would be great, because the same thing with Google Maps, you could download a little segment. For example, I downloaded my little town offline, for example. So if that's doable, I think it will be great. I'm just kind of thinking of, instances when one has no internet access or something happens and you drop from the internet. So that could come in handy.
Yeah, I encourage people to write up suggestions and think of it when you're writing as you are describing this to a developer who may or may not know all the intricacies, because it makes it a lot easier to submit those things to development if they're quite specific, and if you can mention that a problem can be repeated. Those are always easier to solve than the ones that are intermittent. So the more definition you can give to a problem, the better. And please send those both bug items in as well as feature requests.
Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on, and we really appreciate you taking time, especially on a Saturday morning when you should be sleeping in. So I'm so thankful that you sacrificed this Saturday morning to come and talk with our listeners, and thank you so much. And how do people reach you? I know you've told us your email address. People could reach you. Could you repeat that email address again for our listeners? I mean, people could go to your website as well. But I also want to mention here in passing that you guys, the American Printing House, has other apps, lots of other apps in there that people need to check out. So if you haven't been following some of the developments from APH, I think you should be looking into it. I know one of the ones I used to like was the Math Flash that I work with kids on, and I like hearing that that's the ticket or the Kawabanga. I think that was so cool. So, Mike, how do people get hold of you guys? For example, what's the web address and the email address in the event someone wants to reach out to you guys?
Yeah. My APH address is mmay, M-M-A-Y, at aph.org. Of course, the website is aph.org. Within the Indigo app, there's a link to an Indigo page with the highlights and the user manual. Also, APH has a podcast called Change Makers. I have my own personal podcast called The People Make the Places, which comes out once a month, about traveling and the cool people that really define the places that you go as opposed to the place itself. So check out any of those resources, and happy to be on here. I live navigation as part of my life, and it's been part of my career.
It was nice meeting you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good weekend.
Thank you so much, Mike. God bless.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Mike.
bye-bye.
Thanks so much.